The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Real Pickles, a worker-owned cooperative in Greenfield producing organic fermented vegetables sourced from Northeast farms. More information at realpickles.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering in-person and online graduate programs in public policy and data analytics. Admissions now open at umass.edu/SPP.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we learn how the sounds of Oakland have shaped the city's past, present, and future with Northampton author Alex Wirtz's new book, On Loop.
Plus, we'll see how polar plunging can help your neighbors and services provided by the Center for Women and Community as we speak with their director of programming, Kathy Crivelli, about their Chili Challenge event.
But perhaps most importantly, the longest government shutdown in this nation's history ended this week.
But the congressman of the 2nd District might have something to say about how it ended and what, if anything, if actually accomplished.
Are we open? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Finally?
I think, we are open.
Time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Worcester's own Congressman Jim McGovern. There was a vote late last night in the House of Representatives, which finally was called back into session. It got back to work. But earlier this week, in regards to the shutdown and the compromise that 8 Senate Democrats made with the Republicans, you told the Telegram and Gazette earlier this week, I'll be voting hell no. Thune's promise to hold a vote on health care subsidies was only a pinky promise, and that you haven't heard that House Speaker Mike Johnson says he'll bring up any votes when it comes to health care. So how did you vote late last night, Congressman McGovern?
Well, I voted hell no. I kept my word.
Okay.
And it is frustrating that people right now, many people are seeing their health care bills increase by double or triple, in some even quadrupling. And then we have people who are telling me that they are going to go without health insurance, or that they're going to have to sacrifice in order to be able to pay for their health insurance. Look, one of the messages in the last election was affordability. That needs to be the centerpiece of where we focus. And, people need health care. Health care should be viewed as a fundamental human right. And the fact that it is so difficult to get Republicans to agree to address the cost of health care is unconscionable. And so we're going to continue to fight to try to see whether we can extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. We introduced a discharge petition yesterday. We're trying to get 218 people on it to force a vote on that. I think if we have a vote, it will prevail. But it really is frustrating that something this basic, Republicans took a walk.
When we spoke last week, Democrats were reveling in their huge election victory that week. And now I think many Americans think that the Democratic Party has once again lost its spine. Several of these senators who made this compromise deal over the weekend have connections to New England, one of whom was a vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. What is the mood with your colleagues this week?
Well, I think there's a lot of frustration. Again, we talk about healthcare. This is not like an argument about political strategy. I mean, for some people, it's a life or death issue. When it comes to passing tax cuts for multimillionaires or billionaires, the Congress moves in a nanosecond to do it. But when it comes to helping regular people afford their healthcare, that's a problem. I mean, it shows how screwed up priorities are. And I think people have expressed to me, people back in my district, but also people from around the country have expressed frustration over why are those your priorities? Why isn't the government caring more about me and the struggles that regular families have to deal with each and every day? Life is getting too damn expensive here. And you had an opportunity to do something to alleviate some of that burden, and Congress did not. So there's a lot of frustration.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, I've been reading about how the Republicans are hoping to handle this situation with the increasing cost of health care. Supposedly, the GOP is hosting listening sessions. I know that you were posting on Twitter that no one from the Republican Party in the Rules Committee showed up when you were introducing some of these amendments after not being in session for a long time. But there is a plan afoot from the Trump Oval Office basically saying that there could be money directly given out to Americans to cover health expenses and subsidizing some of this out-of-pocket ACA costs for low-income people. What is the likelihood that that is going to be the route that the Republicans take?
Well, first of all, the crisis is now. It was actually yesterday. People have gotten their bills. So they need immediate relief now. And that's what we were trying to do. Not next month, not 2 months from now, but now. So let's get people the relief that they need now to be able to afford their health insurance. And then let's have a wider discussion about health care. As you know, I mean, if I had my way, we would have a very different healthcare system in this country. I believe in Medicare for all. When I was the chairman of the Rules Committee, we did the first hearing ever in Congress on Medicare for all. And it was a very, very good hearing. I had hoped to build on that, but we lost our majority. But, we all have our views about how we fix this broken healthcare system, which is way too expensive. And there's too much focus on profit and on business and not enough on patients. But we have to understand to do that, it takes more than a day. It takes more than an amendment. But we have a crisis right now that we can easily deal with. And Republicans are blocking us and others from offering an amendment to fix it. We have to figure out a way to make life a little easier for regular people.
The deal that reopened the government, from what I was reading, included the passage of just 3 of 12 necessary annual full-year appropriation bills, and Congress only gave itself until the end of January to agree on the rest. Do you anticipate that we're going to go through another shutdown in another 2 months?
I have no idea what's going to happen at the end of January. But here's what I do believe, and that is that Congress ought to practice a little thing called democracy. Let people offer amendments, let people offer their ideas, and let's see whether we can create a budget that, while it may not be perfect from my point of view, is okay enough and it helps my constituents enough where it's worth voting for. And that's not the way this Congress is operating. I mean, you mentioned the Rules Committee. Every single amendment that we offered on this stuff was blocked. All these bills come to the floor under a completely closed rule, which means you can't offer amendments, you can't debate other ideas. That's not the way that Congress is supposed to work. This is crazy. This my way or the highway approach doesn't work very well because it results in things like government shutdowns, which, again, I think shows a failure of Congress to do its job.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, McGoverning with McGovern, despite the fact that this was the longest shutdown in U.S. history at 43 days, all of the headlines today have once again to do with Jeffrey Epstein because Congress was back in session and the necessary vote on the Democratic side to begin the process of releasing the Epstein files. It looks like there will be a vote on this next week, but there was a release of a tranche of documents yesterday, including things saying about how President Trump knew about the girls. That is a quote from one of the Jeffrey Epstein emails. The likelihood that this gets released entirely to the public? Have the Republicans changed their tune on this now that they're starting to see that Trump really is in these Epstein files? And that maybe, from at least one email that I saw, Bill Clinton, who many thought might have tight ties to Jeffrey Epstein, looks like was never on the island, at least according to one of Jeffrey Epstein's emails that I read. What do you think the GOP is going to do now?
Well, they're being forced to actually have to deal with this issue because we introduced a discharge petition, and we have 218 signatures on it, which means it forces this legislation to come to the floor. Yesterday, the White House actually called Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, a very right-wing conservative, to the White House, trying to persuade her and to pressure her to take her name off the list. She didn't do it. And then Adelita Grijalva got sworn in yesterday, and then she signed the discharge petition. So it set the stage for this legislation to advance. And so the speaker really has no choice. I mean, I guess he could try to block it, but that would be horrible. And there are a lot of Republicans who are tired of being put in a position where they have to block all this stuff because they can't explain it back home. So here's the deal. The House will vote next week, hopefully. I think it will pass with a bipartisan vote, and then it's up to the Senate to take it up. And I think the pressure will be on them to move soon. But just release the files. I mean, there may be stuff in it that the president finds embarrassing, but this is a guy who's been in a court of law, has been judged as disrespecting women, raping women. I mean, this is a guy who has a history of bad behavior, and his supporters don't seem to mind. So, just get it out. I think the American people want it. The survivors who have come up to the Hill have begged us to move heaven and earth to get this out because for them it is important. But let's just do it.
SNAP has been in the news, of course, because of the government shutdown and the delay of SNAP benefits on November 1st not going out. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts itself tried to fill the SNAP gap. Is SNAP now out to everyone in this country because the government reopened last night? And is there a way for Massachusetts to recoup state tax dollars that we spent to fill in the void for what the federal government should have been doing all along?
Well, I mean, the administration, first of all, the administration has done something that no other administration has ever done, even during a shutdown, and that is they have illegally withheld food benefits for people in need. We've had, 2 federal court judgments that have ordered the administration to actually pay out the SNAP benefits, and this administration not only refused to do that, I mean, they appeal it to the Supreme Court. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I mean, Donald Trump is not only a lousy president, he's a lousy human being. Like, who does that? Withholding SNAP benefits was illegal. So my hope is that, all these benefits will get out. States will be made whole. The administration has been threatening states that actually use their own dollars to help fill in the gap by saying we're not going to reimburse you. But that's just a rotten, petty thing for them to do. And again, I hope that if they insist on that the Attorney General will go back to court and get a judgment that will force the administration to make states whole.
We're just a little bit under a week and a half away from the March for the Food Bank. Next week on the show, when we talk Congressman McGovern, we're really going to dial in on SNAP and hunger and get ourselves ready for the March for the Food Bank. So I'm going to punt Dr. Dave Gottsagen, who's a regular marcher for the food bank's question, to next week. But another huge story in your district this week was the fire at Olympia Place at UMass. Is this something that the federal government can intervene on in helping with either the people that were displaced or the rebuilding of these places? Or is this strictly a UMass issue, a state issue, or what can be done from your office to help with that fire?
Yeah, I mean, and I've weighed in with the town manager of Amherst and some of our state legislators and said we're happy to do whatever. I'm not sure that this is a FEMA issue, but it may be a MEMA issue, which is a state issue. But obviously there may be some emergency dollars that are available to help in the situation. But the good news is that nobody was injured or harmed, but people did lose a lot of their belongings. But I'm still waiting to get the full assessment of what is needed to remedy the situation and rebuild. And if it's appropriate for us to reach out to federal agencies to ask for their support, I would certainly do that. But I think they will start at the state, and then we will go from there.
After we spoke last week, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi announced that she would not be seeking re-election. She was the former Speaker of the House. I know you have a very close relationship with former Speaker Pelosi. She's still in Congress for the rest of the year. But perhaps this is an opportune time for you to reflect on the impact that Nancy Pelosi has had in the halls of Congress.
I think she's been probably the most consequential Speaker of the House in history. When she was Speaker, things happened. Things got done. The Affordable Care Act passed. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act. So many major pieces of legislation that have a direct impact on my constituents and on regular people all across the country. I think she's a phenomenon. We don't always agree on everything, and when we don't, she lets me know. But I admire her leadership skills. I admire her stamina. And I admire her convictions. She's a huge champion for human rights. I remember when President Xi first came to Washington, she confronted him about why he won't let members of Congress go to Tibet. And he just said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, well, can I go? And he kind of brushed her off and said, oh, yeah, you can go. And she followed up and insisted that we go. I was on that trip. It was the last congressional delegation to be allowed into actual Tibet, where we met with members of the Tibetan community and Tibetan monks and learned firsthand about the human rights atrocities that China was committing against these people. Again, I have great admiration for her and great affection for her. She's a dear friend, and I think the country's going to miss her. But I have a feeling that she's not done yet, that there are many more chapters in her life, and she will find other ways of being helpful to the causes that she cares about.
It ties in nicely to the March for the Food Bank, which now happens Thanksgiving week, because during the summer, when you knew you were going to Tibet with Nancy Pelosi, I remember you calling me saying, Monty, do you think we can move the march to Thanksgiving week? Because I need to go to China with Nancy Pelosi to advocate for the Tibetan people. And I just saw today that the Tibetan community of Amherst is coming along with us on the march and raising funds for the food bank. Thondup, who's one of the big leaders of that community, was posting and put a video up today. So that feels like it ties that nicely together. I was speaking with a teacher at Greenfield Center School last week, Congressman, and he says he always looks forward to what you're going to say when I ask you what gives you hope this week, because sometimes it's real easy to not feel very hopeful given what's going on in the world. So what gives you hope this week, Congressman?
I mean, I'm going to say that, a lot of my colleagues in Congress who are not giving up on things like providing people relief to help pay for their health insurance and people who are fighting back to protect things like SNAP. The Attorney General of Massachusetts, the governor, Governor Healy. I mean, our state legislators. I mean, we have a tendency to want to always pick on government officials and our leaders, but there's some good people out there, and we have a lot of them in our community and in our state, and they made a difference. The suits that Attorney General Campbell filed made a difference, helped focus attention on the importance of food benefits, but also forced the administration's hand. So I will say that there are a lot of people that I work with who give me hope because they're not giving up and they understand that the battles that we're fighting are very, very, very important. And they're not fighting for millionaires and billionaires and corporations. They're fighting for average people, and I appreciate that.
Well, we got a comment for you from our regular questioner, Pocky Wheeland, who this week for you, Congressman, says, "My message to Congressman McGovern is keep courage." You can send a comment or a question, and we're really going to dial into issues about hunger next week in anticipation of the March for the Food Bank on the show. But you can send your questions for Congressman Jim McGovern and McGoverning with McGovern to us here at thefab413@nepm.org.
And can I just say one last thing?
Yes, you can.
You mentioned Pocky. People like Pocky, who live courage every day are an inspiration to me and to so many others. So I appreciate that.
U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts joins us every Thursday. Thanks as always, Congressman.
All the best. Thanks.
We'll hear about the governance of Oakland, California, and how it relates to the sounds and socio-political movements of that city with the new book On Loop from local author Alex Wirtz.
After we find the many puntastic ways you can help to support the work of the CWC at their Chili Challenge this Saturday at Puffer's Pond in Amherst.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Hashi Pottery in 50 Arrow Gallery at Eastworks. Japanese-inspired ceramics and textiles, where every piece is handmade in the Pioneer Valley for home, ritual, or someone dear. HashiPottery.com.
Kathy Crivelli, I know her.
Oh, well, great then.
Be chilly and eat chili to support survivors and a violence-free community.
Whether you're willing to dip a toe or you're willing to get up to your head wet, the CWC Chili Challenge on Saturday, November 15th at Puffer's Pond is inviting all to support their organization.
The challenge is an annual event where participants raise awareness and funds in support of free sexual assault support, advocacy, and prevention services in Hampshire County. All funds raised support CWC's free service for people impacted by violence.
And with us to talk about the event and maybe a little bit about their organization is Kathy Crivelli, Director of Programming and Development for the Center for Women and Community at UMass. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
CWC, Center for Women and Community, it is housed as part of UMass. Can you tell us the organizational structure of this? Is it working just with UMass or working with the greater community?
Especially because there was a name change.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting.
Yes. So we have been embedded at UMass since 1972, so we're over 50 years old. And back in the 1980s, we took over the contract for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health to provide sexual assault support and advocacy services for the entirety of Hampshire County. We work kind of embedded in the county with the DA's office and the courts and the health centers. So we have a wide range of partners that help us do our work. And back in 2014 is when we changed our name from the Every Woman Center to the Center for Women and Community.
Universities always need systems like this in place because things happen on university campuses, but I genuinely forgot that you were it for the county.
Yes.
How much of the work you're doing is with people on campus, though?
All of our services can be anonymous, so sometimes we don't know. People can call us and give any name they want or no name. And we do serve all 5 colleges and have MOUs with 3 of the colleges of the 5 colleges. So a lot of, I think 60,000 people are connected to the universities in this area. So yes, we serve a lot of students, and yes, we serve the community at large.
And what does that service look like? How are people approaching you and how are you serving them?
We have individual services, so folks can call us, they can walk in, and we provide ongoing support as well. So there's a 24-hour hotline, ongoing support sessions. So if people want to come in during the days and see counselors, they can do so. We have psychoeducational groups on safety planning, what to do if you're in a crisis, how to manage anxiety, and support groups as well. And we do medical, legal, and campus advocacy with folks, so we can walk folks through if they choose to report, whether it's they want to go through the Title IX office or whether they want to go to the police station. We'll kind of walk folks through wherever they want us to be in the process.
And then there's other organizations that are kind of couched within you, or at least attached, like Women of Color, and then there's a gay support group as well, that all kind of come under your umbrella a little bit too, correct?
So the Women of Color Leadership Network is a program of CWC, and we do offer more generalized services as well. So we have a free general counseling program, we have specialized services for women of color, we have leadership opportunities. So we have about 50 to 70 volunteers on any given year who help us do our work, and they all receive a 40-hour training that's mandated by the Department of Public Health to provide these services.
Where do your volunteers come from?
We have a large volunteer base located at UMass, which is amazing as a nonprofit agency to have such a ready group. But we also have community volunteers, so those folks really kind of help stand in during the times where students go away to help keep the staffing running. And so it could be anyone from folks in our legal community to our medical community, just a wide range of people.
We're talking with Kathy Crivelli, the Director of Programming and Development for the Center for Women and Community, the CWC, based at UMass Amherst, and their CWC Chili Challenge, which is happening this Saturday, November 15th, at Puffer's Pond, which is like a cold plunge. Tell us about the genesis of this idea. I have cold plunged one time. I did it for the radio, not even for a fundraiser, and that was enough. But eating chili is also a part of this.
I was going to say you might have liked it better if they gave you chili at the end of it.
Yeah, that I am all about. So tell us about the genesis of this chili challenge, Kathy Crivelli.
Sure. So the event was actually started as the CWC Community Challenge back during COVID, and it provided a way for people to come together on their own. So people created their own challenges for the month of April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and then we all came together at the end. And so during that time, myself and a neighbor actually raised a bunch of money by doing a cold plunge every day during the month of April to support survivors. And as we kind of progressed along since COVID, there is certainly a challenge to it, and it's been fun, and we've had a good turnout, and so we are continuing on with that for now. Anyways, we did do a challenge where we hiked the Seven Sisters, and so there's been a couple different challenges that we've done, but this last couple of years we're sticking with the chili challenge.
I'm a sucker for a ridiculous publicity stunt for a good cause.
I mean, who brought the eating chili aspect to the polar plunge?
Yes, so we actually also have a chili chair, so we have an ice sculptor who comes, and people who don't want to get in the water can also challenge themselves to sit on a chili ice throne. So it's more that our team really loves puns. And so when we're thinking, we're like, November isn't really cold. We can't consistently say it's going to be cold, but it is chilly, you know?
The CWC is sort of couched in, it's attached to UMass. We already tried to figure out how that relationship works. But what do these funds that get raised through this sort of effort go towards for the CWC?
For instance, we have a 24-hour hotline. 365 days a year, we are here and ready to serve folks, and there's a cost to that. So we have about 4 layers of staff on any given evening so that we can meet someone at the hospital if they need in the middle of the night, or we can, serve more than one person at a time. There is costs associated with everything we do, as you can imagine, but the life-saving kind of critical services are really what it would take up the most costs. We also have costs related to training our volunteers so that they can help do the work that we do. I think that they contribute about $150,000 worth of time every year. And so we just, we have minimal funding to do the basics of a lot of things. And then any funding that comes in extra lets us do things like additional programming. We have kind of a support space here at the center where people can come and drop in, and it has activities to help practice how to ground yourself and how to deal with the effects of anxiety, things like that. So we get to do more with funds that we raise independently, I guess I would say.
Tell us about how many people the CWC is working with in a year, because I think a lot of things like assault can go under the radar and we don't realize how big of an issue it is even in the communities within which we live. So can you tell us a little bit about how many people you're working with, Kathy Crivelli from CWC?
Sure. So yes, no one likes to talk about the services we offer, right? And as a generality. And so we provide about 3,000 sexual assault support and advocacy services to people impacted by violence a year. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that we get calls from parents, from faculty and staff at the colleges. That includes hotline counseling, safety planning, going to the hospital, attending folks in court. We also do violence prevention workshops and provide education on best practice to how to receive a disclosure of sexual assault. So we do that with our EMTs, and we do that with the Res Life staff at all the campuses, or 3 of the campuses. And that's about 60 to 90 workshops on any given year. And we train about 700 people on that specific how to care and connect. So how to listen to someone who might have experienced violence, provide empathy, and get them connected to the best resources for them.
So the school year is in full swing, but you mentioned that this center works 365 to 366 days a year. What happens with your services during the summer when the students aren't really around as much?
During the summer and during January, things calm down a little bit for us. That's really when we get to do our heavy planning for the year. And folks can still call, so it's not like they're gone and we're not available for them. So there is opportunity for students even when they go home.
The Center for Women and Community, the CWC, is hosting a chili challenge this Saturday at Puffer's Pond. I know if you need a ride, you can go to the Haggis Mall and get a ride to Puffer's Pond right down the street there from UMass campus. And then 11 a.m. on Saturday is plunge time. And then I see that the plunge time is only 15 minutes, which is probably good and healthy, before the actual chili that you eat and the hot cider and games begin. Kathy Gravelli, though, and I believe I know perhaps the person that you were cold plunging with that entire time in April.
You got it.
Yeah. Are you cold plunging this Saturday for the chili challenge for CWC as well? Or are you just there to orchestrate and give pro tips about how to do this?
I will be in the water.
What does it bring to you? Like, when we did the segment about this early on in the history of the show, people were like, it's invigorating and it makes you feel alive. And I was like, I was cold and then it was over. What does cold plunging mean to you, Kathy Gravelli?
Well, to me, I would say during COVID, when we did plunge every day, we actually plunged from February to April, but it was really about that feeling of aliveness. And I didn't know about the benefits, the physiological benefits of cold plunging until after I was experiencing them. And so for me, it just confirmed, I feel elevated for hours afterward. It's like invigoration, elevation, and kind of like a whole body reset.
Maybe I should try it again.
It's
Come on, Monty.
It's totally up to you. This is. I apologize for the snark of this question. Can you guarantee that the chili that will be served will not have celery in it?
I cannot. So we do have vegetarian and non-vegetarian chili. I do not know about the celery ingredients. They do have listed ingredients there, so you could choose on the spot if you.
What's your problem with
don't like
celery?
Okay, white people, stop putting celery in chili. It's not supposed to be there. And also, if you don't put chili peppers or chili powder in your chili, it is tomato soup, period.
Boom.
It is a chili challenge. So I'm going to assume that both the vegetarian and non-vegetarian chili will have actual chilies in it, and that you will be
That's not a guarantee in New England.
I guess you're right.
I feel like this is a valid. I have had some experiences, and I feel like this is a valid question to be asking.
You're going to
UMass
support
Dining Services. UMass has #1 dining services across the country, I hear. But they'll be providing the food, so any feedback can go direct.
And don't hold it against the CWC if you
No,
don't like the
That's
chili.
right. We are not responsible for the celery.
We're there to support survivors in a violence-free community at the Be Chili and Eat Chili CWC Chili Challenge this Saturday, November 15th, around 10-ish at Puffer's Pond, and then 11 o'clock plunge time. Kathy Gravelli, the Director of Programming and Development for the Center for Women and Community, and their Be Chili, Eat Chili Challenge this Saturday. Have fun, I guess, if that's your bag, to jump in the cold water. I know it is yours.
But if you don't want to jump in the cold water and you just want to help, you can still go and be a part of the festivities and sit in the chili chair and eat some chili and donate to a good cause.
Thank you. Hope to see you there.
Well, I'm going where?
Thanks again to Kathy Gravelli of the CWC for chatting with us about this important organization and event.
Now, to see how the politics of a place can influence the sound and volume of that place, as with Northampton's Alex Worth's new book, On Loop, which looks at how both of those affect the landscape of Oakland, California.
And hear how you can meet the author himself at an event at 33 Holly on November 18th. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Eastside Grill, celebrating 40 years in downtown Northampton, serving steaks, seafood, and American cuisine to the Pioneer Valley and beyond. Open Wednesday through Monday, eastsidegrill.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Comfort Bagel, scratch-made artisan sourdough bagels, spreads, and sandwiches for breakfast or lunch on Main Street in Westfield and at their new location in Holyoke at 92 Race Street. ComfortBagel.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Chicago has house, Detroit has techno, but Oakland slaps. On Loop is a new book that explores the role of black dance music and sonic politics in recurring struggles over race and space in Oakland, California. Insisting on the centrality of sound in everyday social movements, from the mobilization of funk music and boogaloo dance during Black Power, Alex Worth argues that black dance music is not merely a soundtrack to or record of urban resistance, it is essential to that resistance.
As both a means of empowerment and a magnet for policing, black dance music has transformed not only Oakland's nightlife, but also its streets, parks, and neighborhoods. On Loop is a rousing encounter with the sound that moves urban life.
And the author is Alex Worth, who is a geographer, movement researcher, and DJ. This is his first book, although he comes from an author family. We'll get to that. Alex researched On Loop while living, working, and making art in the East Bay from 2009 to 2022. He now lives back in his hometown of Northampton, Massachusetts, but continues to work in the Bay Area remotely as a policy and research specialist for housing justice. There will be a book party and performance celebrating the book On Loop this coming Tuesday, November 18th from 7 to 9 at the Workroom at 33 Hawley. Thanks for joining us, Alex Worth.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You being a known quantity to people in the Valley in particular, we should mention that you are known by a different name growing up here and also by a DJ moniker. So if people are curious if Alex Worth is the person they think that it might be, your other name to go by is?
My other name to go by is Sasha. That's my DJ name, and also just the name that I'm known by in community now. I showed the kind of advanced cover of this book to some friends of mine that I've made since moving back to the Valley in 2023, and they were like, man, that's a beautiful cover. Who's Alex? So this feels like an important opportunity to reach the masses and explain to people that Alex and Sasha are one and the same.
And it's not Barry Worth, which is another name that's popular on books in the area, because that's your dad who's an author.
That's true, yes. My dad is an author of many books, so I grew up in a kind of literary household. This is my first book, but I've been around them for a long time.
This is going to sound like a strange overgeneralization, but I feel like everyone who is called to post-grad geography is a little bit of an interesting duck. What appealed about geography for you to study it?
Yeah, I've just been really interested in space for as long as I can remember, and not like the outer space kind.
The kind of space that I love.
Yeah, not that kind of space. It started with a love of architecture, and it kind of emerged from there into a love of cities, and not just for, their form or for the things that are kind of pretty or dynamic about them, but really understanding them as a kind of text through which you can understand the social history of a given place. My training has been first in urban studies, and then, I did my PhD in geography at UC Berkeley. But the way I think about it is a kind of social science of space. So how is it that big, broad social forces, things like racism, capitalism, cultural innovation and evolution, how is it that they come to shape environments, and how do they come to be shaped by environments as well?
That actually was one of the really cool parallels I found in your book, talking about like that space and how those spaces get shaped. I found, not to quote somebody a group that you quote often in this book, Digital Underground, and same, like all around the world, same song, but looking at the way that Oakland got split up was very similar to the methods that built 95 along the East Coast. Displacing entire communities that had finally gotten established was extremely reminiscent of those neighborhoods in New York and Connecticut, in Boston, and all along just to build that highway. There were really striking similarities.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. I mean, this kind of anti-Black racism cuts across so many different parts of this country. I think often also about this kind of Amiri Baraka. He was Leroy Jones at the time, but this quote of the kind of this idea of the changing same, or everywhere you go, same song. But at the same time, there are things that I think that are really unique and particular to Oakland. Like, for instance, the politics surrounding highway construction that you're talking about. It was especially severe and intentionally so in West Oakland, which was the place where African Americans American migrants from the U.S. South and Southwest moved during the Second Great Migration, drawn mostly by shipbuilding activity that was happening during World War II. That neighborhood got 3 highways inserted into it. And so, yes, in some ways that story is really similar to what has played out in other cities with large Black communities. But one of the things that's really interesting about Oakland is the way in which communal resistance to that actually, kind of fed directly into the forms of civil rights and Black power organizing that the city is known for. I think a part of the story of the Black Panther Party, which of course was founded in Oakland in 1966, that people don't always appreciate as much, is how much that revolutionary movement, which came to be kind of transnational, actually started in a lot of ways by responding to very local, hyper-local, bread and butter urban political concerns, things like jobs, highway building, conflicts with the police department, and things like that.
We're speaking with author Alex Worth, whose new book is called On Loop. It will be celebrated in his hometown of Northampton, Massachusetts this coming Tuesday, although it surrounds Oakland and specifically Lake Merritt. The name of the book also is perfect for so many different reasons. Can you tell us about Lake Merritt, your loop, and why the book is called On Loop?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lake Merritt it's not a perfect loop. It's kind of loop-ish, but, like lakes are often. Lake Merritt is actually an estuary that's right adjacent to downtown in Oakland. And so it's kind of like the central part of the city. And in a lot of ways, it functions as Oakland's central park, not just literally, but also in terms of its kind of import to communities that live there. It is a really popular gathering place. And I think for that very reason, also is a place where people's ability to make life there and to belong is constantly kind of in jeopardy or under question. There are a very popular series of trails that go around the outside, form a kind of loop. People are looping around them at all hours of the day and night. And I, as I explained in the book, as soon as I moved to Oakland in 2009, I was drawn into the vitality of that space and would regularly walk this 3-mile loop. And it's kind of on those repetitive walks that I came to understand the city more deeply and started to think about looping as a kind of really helpful metaphor for so much of the kind of political struggle unfolding in the present when I was there, as well as what I was learning about its past. So the title On Loop is at least a double entendre, might even refer to 3 or more things, but it basically is really trying to put a focus on this theme of repetition. To boil it down in a very kind of simplistic way, there are aspects of repetition that I talk about in the book that I would say are maybe good repetition, and there are forms of repetition that we might say are bad repetition. And I think that, this book basically charts 100 years of the Black freedom struggle in Oakland. And in laying out that narrative, I came to realize that while certain things definitely changed from, moment to moment, again, coming back to this idea of the changing same, what is even more striking is how patterns recur and repeat over time in very dramatic ways. So that is the kind of maybe the bad repetition, the way in which anti-Black racism is such a persistent force in this country in general, as well as in Oakland city politics. But on the other side of that, Black Oaklanders are repeatedly going back to various cultural practices and traditions that have emerged from the community as ways of making life and refusing those racist structures. So I was interested in the way repetition is both a feature of racism as well as the resistance to it. And then the last thing I'll say is just boiling down at the kind of cultural forms of resistance, looping itself as a kind of sonic, almost even spiritual technology that shows up over and over again in those practices. So in the book, I talk about the advent of funk music, for instance, and their use of looping grooves as a way of getting time to dissolve and working dancers into a state of euphoria, thinking about sample-based music and hip-hop in the way that loops are essential to the kind of sonic technology of hip-hop culture, and as well as the cover of the book, also thinking about these car parties called sideshows where folks will spin donuts in their car. So looping is a kind of recurring cultural practice itself that shows up again and again as a form of resistance.
We're speaking with Alex Worth, whose new book is called On Loop, and it will be celebrated in Northampton, his hometown, on Tuesday at 33 Holly.
One of the beautiful things I think about this book, too, is that in addition to getting into some of the actual landscape, part of the cultural landscape is that sonic landscape. Like the sound of the city itself defines how the city gets traversed and works. Can you talk a little bit about what the defining sounds of Oakland are? Or at least as you experience them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I should say, first of all, Oakland is such an immensely diverse place. It is an historically Black city, and it is a place of really significant importance when it comes to Black American politics and culture. And at the same time, there are so many different communities in Oakland. And so the soundscapes that I'm focusing on in particular are Oakland's black soundscapes. But within that, I will say that some of the soundscapes that really matter, I mean, I think about, again, returning to Lake Merritt. It is a place of such vibrancy, although always contested. There's a part of the lake where there's almost like kind of like a natural little amphitheater that has been a place where a lot of soulful house music DJs have repeatedly set up parties. It started as like a 4th of July party when I used to be living out there. Now it's actually an every Friday night party. Sometimes it's permitted, sometimes it's not, but it is such an incredible scene. You know, if you allow yourself to become immersed in it and transformed by it, it is intergenerational, it is positive, it is joyful. You know, there are people there who are like the most amazing cypher dancers I've ever seen. There are other people who are bopping in their wheelchairs. It is often a source of complaints for residents who live in the area, right? And this is the thing, is that sound in general, I think, is like very polarizing, especially public sound. You add in race, you add in blackness in particular, and that it brings that kind of polarization up. It makes it even more intense. And I think that's something that the city as a whole, as a community, like really needs to look at and to address with a sense of both like trying to create cohabitation, but also think about it with a kind of ethic and lens of justice.
It's interesting because they are concepts that make perfect sense that I've experienced so many times, but you say so succinctly in the book, referring to them as white sonic politics and the war on nuisance, which both of these things factor largely into the book about the pushback to the liberation that people feel from expressing themselves through these sonic means, through these house dance parties, through drumming in this same area, going all the way back to before the Black Panther movement and how that came up and was pushed back against in that time frame, to the legendary meme of Barbecue Becky, which also I believe is from Lake Merritt. Like everyone has seen this picture of the woman in Terminator glasses on the phone calling the cops on people just having a good time at a cookout. That is where this book takes place.
And frankly, like put into really easy words, something that I have internalized my entire life. Being extremely aware when I'm in public of how loud I am.
Yeah.
And being told of how loud I am, even when I'm not being loud or when I'm being excited. It's something that I am constantly aware of because I know the cops will get called on me. I've had the cops called on me. My family resonates against itself. When we are together, we are generally louder. But having cops called on family occasions and just navigating through predominantly white spaces, constantly aware of how much sonic space I actually take up, more than just this body. And that was interesting to see on the page in somebody else's words.
Yeah, how did you kind of crack that nut, psychologically speaking, I guess, of figuring out that it was the noise, the sonic aspect of the resistance that people were rebelling against as a white dude from Northampton originally?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot to say about that, certainly. But I mean, I think the best way to answer it is to kind of give you a little bit more context for where this book comes from, because I appreciate also, we're on the radio right now. I'm a white Jewish guy from Northampton. Feels really important to say.
I'm not.
Khalees is not, and thank you for sharing your
I'm
story,
none of
by
the above.
way. But as basically like a lifelong dancer, a music head, a DJ, when I got out to Oakland, I was really captivated and drawn in by, and honestly transformed by, the nightlife there and the cultural scene there. And it was just kind of over time that, through a kind of process of repeatedly showing up and making friends and getting involved in some parties and some cultural organizing work, that I started to hear more and more stories about how musicians and cultural organizers were running up against all of these sonic regulations. And, in some ways they might seem sort of minor, being like, you need to, if you want to set up and do that street festival, you're going to need to get an amplified sound permit. You're going to need to talk to the police in order to do that. And then just hearing from people what their experiences of that was like, how traumatizing it could be, how it called upon previous experiences of feeling basically excluded from their own city on account of what kind of music they were going to play at the party, or when they wanted to do it, or where they wanted to do it. And I got really curious about these seemingly small little moments of regulation that actually had a really outsized impact. This was also taking place over the arc of the 2010s, which was the period in which, after many, many years of racialized neglect, gentrification in Oakland really started to take off. So it became a moment of intense struggle and pushback against the sense of the city being taken over and working class folks, Black people in particular, being pushed out. And I came to see that for the people who I was in community and collaboration with, these kinds of moments of struggle over something like a drum circle or over the closure of a beloved cultural space or nightclub, they came to kind of reverberate with a force that was greater than whatever that little moment of regulation was. And so that's really why I decided to focus on that in the book.
And the book is On Loop by Northampton's Alex/Sasha Worth, and it will be celebrated on Tuesday, November 18th from 7 to 9 at the Workroom, 33 Holly in Northampton, back in your home haunts, while still being connected to Oakland, where this book takes place.
Most books get edited down from something much larger. What are some aspects of Oakland that you weren't able to include in this that you think people should know to be more connected to the networks that you have on display in your pages?
This book started as a dissertation, and then there is some of that DNA still in here. Although I will say I was striving for, and I think I was successful in making the book a lot more narrative and character driven. And going through that. Okay, great, cool.
Yes,
glad to get back. Anyway,
we can tell where the bones came.
Yes.
Yeah. The bones are undeniable. Yeah, and it was just there was so much research that I was not able to fit into the eventual book.
So you DJ also, and you have since before you moved to Oakland. What did your time in Oakland change about the sets that you create now?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that I just love about that place so much is the way that I experience a certain kind of seamlessness between party and politics, right? There are many forms of dance music, I think, within a kind of African-American lineage in particular, where the politics are really explicit, thinking about things like kind of like message music from the 1960s or like politicized hip-hop from the 1990s all the way through to today. A lot of that actually came from the East Bay. But even without kind of railing against the regime or something like that in a really explicit way, I think one of the things that I learned while living out there was how the rhythms, the kind of ceremonies of sound that DJs could create through these kinds of immersive communal experiences, that there's a politics even in that, right? That there's a politics in pleasure, especially when coming from a certain kind of history of marginalization and struggle. Oakland just really embodies this seamlessness between party and politics, bringing in a spiritual element, a playful element, a kind of edge to it. I love the kind of non-binary nature of that. And so I think that coming of age there musically as both a DJ and a dancer, it really transformed my musical style in terms of always thinking about that. And sometimes the explicit politics will come in. I'll drop in a track where someone is going off, dropping their ideological message. And I love that. But even if that becomes more submerged, I think that element is still always there in the sets that I play.
The book is called On Loop, and as we mentioned, Alex Worth, the author, the cover has a picture of a car doing donuts on the front, which is called Sideshows in Oakland, and it reminds me of what's going on politically right now, even in Massachusetts, with these quote-unquote street takeovers, or even in Springfield. We'll be leaving the building here once in a while, and there'll be like 6 kids on bicycles riding their
the
bikes.
Bicycle gang.
Yeah, and mostly black and brown kids, to be honest. This is something that is part of their own version of resistance as well. And so what's your take on contemporary life in your home state of Massachusetts, having observed this for, better than a decade in Oakland, when the governor, Maura Healey, is, trying to crack down on this kind of thing here in Massachusetts?
Man, that's really interesting. The way that I learned this history is that this kind of street culture actually comes from Oakland. And it's true, it has kind of gone viral in the last decade, especially kind of during the pandemic where a lot of other gathering spaces closed down. And as it has traveled, it has come to be labeled primarily, I think, by governmental agencies, police departments, and the media as the street takeover. But there's a very long and specific lineage of the sideshow in Oakland. I think what's maybe important for people who are starting to experience this in their own communities to know, and maybe my book can give them some insight into that, is that while people tend to fixate on the parts of the sideshow or the street takeover that feel more menacing or unsettling, maybe that's like the sound of screeching tires, maybe it happens in your neighborhood at 3 a.m, maybe it feels like, I'm worried about the way these people are driving, are they gonna crash into one another, are they gonna hit a person, hit a car, hit a light pole, something like that. That's where a lot of the attention fixates, but the way that I try to contextualize it in the book is to talk about the kind of longer history of the exclusion of African-American youth in Oakland from safer indoor places of gathering. The sideshow emerged in the 1980s in the context of Reagan-era cuts on things like youth recreation programs, and also just, again, the straight-up disinvestment of the Flatlands neighborhoods of Oakland, which left the movie theaters closed, the roller rink closed, the kind of places where teenagers could otherwise gather. Folks need to gather somewhere. Building upon the sort of car culture which California tends to be known from, people started gathering at semi-abandoned parking lot at a old shopping mall in East Oakland, mostly as just like a meetup, a place to show off your cars, a place to listen to rap music, which was was then becoming popular in the city, and just like, again, have some place, a sort of self-determined space in which to socialize. It was only after the Oakland Police Department actually moved their traffic division into an abandoned department store at that mall, forcing young people out from the kind of enclosure of the parking lot into the streets where they needed to find a new place to kind of take over a corner and throw these parties. It was only then that it really became much more sort of rebellious and got pushed into neighborhoods where it came to really bother residents at night.
So maybe if we are better at creating better spaces for people, we don't have to worry about the so-called nuisance.
Or, just including people in the spaces that we already have.
Yeah. I will say, Alex Worth, I love all the music that comes up in this book, all the descriptions of Sly and the Family Stone and James Brown and Parliament, and then moving forward into the hip-hop era with Digital Underground. It gave me a whole new perspective on MC Hammer that I wasn't
I'm glad.
expecting to love. And
Oh, really?
I always liked Hammer, but he was always, to me, like a little bit corny, but this made me like...
Did you ever see his movie?
I didn't know.
It's basically like a really long music video that goes into a lot more like faith in Black community, like community action in general, street and gang violence. But like the base of that movie is basically him trying to uplift the community.
Yeah, and that's what he does in this book too. And you see that he kind of comes from that background. But then MC Hammer, who's maybe one of the most across the board accepted rappers of his era, can't play in Oakland. Can you explain why Hammer was not allowed to perform in his hometown?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Hammer was on tour with Heavy D and the Boys in 1990, and it was a massive tour. I mean, Hammer was known for his kind of enormous stage presence with like tons of backup dancers, 2 DJs, a live band, all these people who, by the way, he often recruited from local nightclubs in the East Bay. And he was kind of coming back to perform at the Oakland Coliseum, which is a really important site for him because he was originally noticed as a kind of kid dancing on the street and kind of scalping tickets outside of Oakland A's games, which the A's play there in East Oakland. And so it was kind of an epic homecoming. During the show, the venue sort of insisted on keeping the lights on. This is an interesting thing. It's like, it seems kind of minor. Like, why does the venue insist that the lights have to be on at a rap concert? Yeah. Ultimately, it's about not having faith that rap fans can behave themselves in a large setting. I actually found through my research that practice in Oakland went back to the post-war era at youth recreational dances in West Oakland. The police required them to keep the lights on at black dances. So it was actually, again, another loop there. But in any case, fans were really upset about this practice. People wanted to just come to a concert, and things got kind of unruly and rowdy. And ultimately, the Coliseum basically said, we're not going to have rap concerts for a year. The 2 largest concert venues in Oakland in 1990 both declared a straight up moratorium on rap concerts. So this is one of the things that I try to do in the book is to look at how certain kind of racist stigma around black dance music, in this case really hip hop and rap, how that came to feed into a set of regulatory practices that certainly harmed massive millionaire style musicians like Hammer, but more so than that, harmed local members of the community, people who just wanted to come and see their favorite artist, or might have aspirations to become an artist themselves, but increasingly venues closed their doors to rap concerts in ways that made that impossible.
I'll also give a shout out to the former professor of American music at Smith College, Dr. Steve Waxman, the Doctor of Rock, who you quote several times.
I do.
In this book, who was working right down the street from you while you were growing up at Smith College.
I know. I only wish that we had met. I understand he's in the UK
wow, you never
now,
even got to meet him.
No.
So we would have loved to have brought you both together. He was only came on the show one time too. But
Yep.
Many times on the old show.
We tried several times. Place and placiness is important across the board in cultural constructs, including racism and how racism works in this country. And I think that there is an interesting advantage that California has in being so new that allows some of the more successful political movements to kind of stay in zeitgeist there, as opposed to the East Coast, which has been around for like 400 years, has had the statute of slavery for as long, and has never really been able to lift itself out of how heavy that tradition is. That said, there's definitely some parallels between the two, but do you see a sort of rejuvenation in the way that Black culture continues to reinvent itself in this loop in California, as opposed to like here now that you're back in New England?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is that the the kind of Black cultural elders and cultural producers who I spent time with while working on this book, I learned from them about their feelings about what was sort of unique about the Bay Area and about California. And I do think that one of the things that makes the cultural output from Oakland, California so potent is kind of the combination of its political vibrancy, like how politicized it is, how focused on liberation it is, but at the same time, how not self-enclosed it is, also how open it is to kind of to solidarity and to hybridity and things like that. So, I mean, if you think about both the culture and the politics happening in Oakland in the late 1960s and early 1970s, thinking about the Black Panther Party for self-defense, the Black Panthers in some ways define themselves in opposition to the more enclosed cultural nationalist organizations that existed in that time, right? They were really looking at being like, this is a Black-centered movement for liberation, but at the same time, like anybody who is truly down with that is welcome. We're looking at what what Huey Newton called kind of revolutionary intercommunalism. So that ethic is really like built into the way that Black freedom politics, I think, tend to happen there. And then on the other hand, you have something like Sly and the Family Stone. I'm really interested in the kind of the parallels between the Panthers and Sly and the Family Stone. That's in chapter 2 of the book.
Sure is.
But, first of all, Sly and the Family Stone was a mixed race band, which unto itself was sort of unique at that time. But on top of that, the kind of musical influences that the band was pulling in, they were drawing upon the kind of Oakland blues, which was there in a previous period, certainly drawing upon James Brown and the movement from soul into funk, but also there was other things happening in the Bay Area at that time too, right? There was Carlos Santana, there was like Latin music happening, there was the Grateful Dead, there's this kind of psychedelia happening. And they were like, it is Black and it is liberatory for us to ingest all of that and do our own thing. And I think that is actually quite unique.
Go back and listen to Sly's early albums. Mad psychedelic.
Mm-hmm.
You can skip the Dead if you want.
Yeah, it's okay. I am okay about that too.
I'm not going to argue.
What was the easiest thing about writing this book and what was the hardest?
I think the easiest thing about writing this book was just continuing to do it, just to come back to it again and again. I found this work so compelling. I hope that it comes across that I have a deep love for Oakland. I have a deep love for this place. And I had to leave there for family reasons in 2022. And continuing to work on this book has helped me to stay connected. I think one of the hardest things about writing this book was to write about urban history and politics and dance music together in a way that didn't give either of them short shrift. Again, the bones of this book are academic, and in academia, we would call this kind of like an interdisciplinary project. I felt like doing interdisciplinarity well is actually really difficult. It's really easy to kind of get in one lane, you're trained in one thing, and then you want to maybe borrow or sample from other fields, and that's okay, that's great. But to be able to really steep yourself in more than one discipline in a way that even maybe mutually transforms both, that's much harder to do. And that's what I was trying to do in this book, between bringing together conversations in urban studies with conversations more in the humanities around music and sound studies. And then just, I guess, a quick kind of addendum to that. Also, the other hardest thing about writing this book was doing it while parenting a toddler.
Yeah, that's facts.
No doubt about it.
This was a really fun read.
It really was a fun read. Alex Sasha Worth, On Loop is your first book. Black Sonic Politics in Oakland. There will be a performance and book party with a Q&A and a reception on Tuesday, November 18th, 7 to 9 at the Workroom at 33 Hawley in your old hometown of Northampton.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
We had to skip a lot of stuff about MC Hammer that you can listen to in the podcast version of that conversation.
And please do. And you can RSVP to the Alex Worth book launch event for On Loop by searching for the book title on Eventbrite, and we'll link to that in the show notes.
On the next Fabulous 413, we dig through the stacks at Turn It Up CDs in Northampton to get exciting news from owners Patrick Pizzotti and Chandra Hancock.
Plus, a way you can fight hunger and grab a nice sip with a friend that we'll discuss with the folks at State Street Fruit Store, Deli Wine and Spirits.
And live music Friday with the band you're hearing right now, the Berkshire-based Down Delta Sounds of Misty Blues, before you can see them live at De La Luz in Holyoke Friday night.
They're so good. She's so good, y'all. Like, you have no idea. It's going to be a blast. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
I'm scared to see my baby, yes I will.